Welcome to Unspoken, community and business conversations powered by Touch Cleveland. Following last year's racial uprisings, we saw a plethora of Black stories resurface, and it brought to the forefront the importance of knowing our history or being bound to repeat it. Traditionally, Blacks kept history by gathering around their elders and listening to their stories, but today's generation seems to have lost that value. Rose's Living Legends sat down with Cleveland's prominent movers and shakers aged 70 and up to capture their wisdom, experiences, and more importantly, to give them their roses while they're here. In truth and in light, this is Unspoken. Today we are starting with Charles C.
Thanks for having me.
We're so glad to have you. Okay, so let's just start off with who are you? How long have you been in Cleveland? Tell us who you are.
Oh, certainly. When you ask me who I am, I'd probably answer that from four perspectives: familial, spiritual, political, and professional. And so familial, I'm married. I've got 4 children, 10 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. Yeah, so that goes back, surrounded by a loving extended family and a good community of friends that have probably been the source of support and care. So I'm pretty thankful to have been surrounded by that kind of a community. Spiritually, I am a practicing metaphysician. Belong to the Miracle Church of Religious Science that is founded on the Science of Mind teachings. It's a non-denominational Christian ministry that follow the teachings of Jesus the Christ. So I'm involved in that as well. Professionally, I've been involved in the criminal justice arena for the last probably 50 years. I spent 44 years at the agency where we are here now, with a particular focus on criminal justice. And my first love professionally has always been youth love, where I've been in the community. I run drop-in centers and youth centers and youth programs across the greater Cleveland community for years and years. And politically, I probably would define myself as a humanitarian, indulging in what I would call the politics of the right. So not the right as in right-leaning, but is in those things which are right to do. Try to be a stand and stand on the side of the people in justice, and particularly social justice. So that's who I am.
So what would you say you are best known for, or what would you classify as your most significant contribution?
Well, I'll address the last one first. Probably my most significant contributions are my children. They are responsible human beings. They have carved out a place for themselves where they are passionate about the work they're doing in the space that they're in. They really exemplify the adage of being the change that you want to see in the world. So they all are fine examples that they walk. So I would say that having given the world 4 children is probably my greatest contribution. Probably what I'm best known for is my work in the criminal justice arena. As I said, I served there for 44 years with a focus on working with returning citizens. At one time, when I began my ministry, people involved in the criminal justice system were referred to as ex-cons, and we saw that language become humanized and evolve over years. They went from ex-cons to persons previously incarcerated to now, when you talk about folks involved in the criminal justice system, you talk about returning citizens. So, and finally, the humanization of those individuals. And then same thing working with youth. When I first started, they were saying hardcore youth. And now you talk about youth at risk and recognize that young people are traumatized, and how do we work with them, because obviously something has happened to them, and how do we as a community, abuse serving institutions, work with those youngsters and help them find the change that they need to have a good, solid, productive life. So that's probably what I've been up to, what I'm probably going to be best known for, I think. And also for an attempt to be a servant in this community, to serve the people that I've been fortunate enough to be involved with.
What is one of the most significant moments in history that you have witnessed?
Well, interesting. Given my age, I would say my most significant moment just happened a couple of years ago that I've observed, which was the courage that Darnella Frazier and Donald Wayne Williams II and Gina Lee Scurry, those folks who stood in front of the Cup Foods deli in Minnesota and protested the murder of George Floyd. That, and then following that, witnessed the millions of people around the world who came out in protest of that murder and in support of social justice and equity, and stood against racism and bigotry. I would say that was probably my most significant moment in history. I toss in, of course, the election of Carl and Lewis Stokes, who were elected here in Cleveland, along with Shirley Chisholm, the first black female of Congress, and certainly the election of Barack Obama, significant moments. But as I look at all of those, I'd probably say Darnella Frazier and Donald Williams would probably my most significant moments.
Wow, that's amazing. In all your years, that is one of the moments that is most significant for you. I think that was the most significant moment for all of us in those years. Wow. Is there something about life that you thought would be different by now? And I think I can kind of imagine what you might say along this, but is there something about life or society that you thought would be different by now, or is there something that's actually farther along than you imagined it would be?
Well, to tell you the truth, Chardonnay, I kind of thought that by now that the world would have learned that hate begets hate. And that here we are, lo these many years later, and folks are still finding reasons to hate each other. That I think Rodney King, we will have to deal with Rodney King's question, why can't we all just get along? I thought that you cannot quench the human spirit. Oppressed people will never surrender. There will always be a struggle for freedom. And so I would have thought that the world would have come to itself by now and discovered that and really embraced that truth and moved along and tried to begin to create a world, because folks are just not going to settle for being oppressed. And until that gets addressed, the world will be filled with strife.
What's one thing you wish you would have done?
I probably wish I had participated in the Selma to Montgomery March with Dr. King and John Williams and Parthia Hill and Diane Nash and all those courageous folks who attempted to cross that Pettus Bridge, and who stood for freedom and demanded a right to participate in the democracy that was governing their lives. So I wish I had been there. I wish I had participated in that. But while I did not do that, I've always tried to live a life that those folks would be proud of and that honors their memory. We owe each other a debt, and a debt to live excellence based on the sacrifice that those folks made. So
you preach now. So I want to expand on that a little more, because
my mom, who is 64, she mentioned that, you know, she really didn't know much about Dr. King coming up. She didn't really learn much about him until after he was assassinated. And so I'm just wondering, like, do you feel like you were educated or informed on the civil rights movements of that time?
Yes, we were in the thick of the fray. Yeah, it was going down when we were coming along. Emmett Till had been killed, and I was a small boy. I can remember sitting around my table and my parents talking about, you know, the absolute tragedy and outrage that the Emmett Till situation was. And Dr. King was emerging. Rosa Parks had refused to surrender her seat. The Viola Louisiana out of Detroit and other freedom riders were headed south to protest the bigotry and racism that was going on there. Malcolm X had began to rise, was offering some, so you had nonviolence and you had defend yourself at all costs, by any means necessary was there. So yeah, there was, when I was coming along, it was prominent. It was the era in which it was happening. Carl Stokes was running for mayor here, was the first, as you know, was the first black man elected to a major metropolitan city as mayor. So we were right in the thick of it. So it was going down.
So were you around high school, college around that time?
No, I was high school. I was junior high school. It was making my way. One of my laments was that they came back. No, I think I was out of school then, but some folks came by the house and said, "Come on, we're going up to the Portland Outway Center. Dr. King will be speaking up there." And I was having difficulty in embracing a nonviolent movement, so I said, "Oh, maybe I'll catch him next time," you know, because
you were on Malcolm X side.
I was a defend yourself kind of fella at that, you know, during that era. And then I swore I would never forget the names of the four little girls with the 16th Street Avenue bombing. Denise McNair, Addie Mae Collins, Carol Robertson, and Cynthia Wesley. And I committed myself to always remember those names because those were children whose life was taken because of civil rights and the struggle that they were involved in. As a matter of fact, Chardonnay, we named the center after Denise. Was over a youth center, was over in the Woodland area, and her mom, Chris McNair, her dad, Chris McNair, and her mom, Maxine, they came to town for the grand opening of that center. That was several years ago.
So I do want to wrap back around to your career and just ask you one last question.
Certainly.
I guess it's a two-part question. What led you specifically to dedicate your career to returning citizens and that fight? Or also, I guess, when did you realize that was going to be your purpose and passion?
Well, interesting question. As I said, youth work was always my first love. So I ran youth center. It was under the Carl Stokes administration, and they had opened up a series of drop-in centers around the city of Cleveland, and I was youth director at one of the drop-in centers. And so I was working with youngsters, and we were out on the street, day and night, being involved with youngsters. And as they got involved with the juvenile justice system, we would go down and advocate for them and help them, negotiate that system. And those that were coming home, we would continue to try to do some work with them. And so I left the center. My dad made his transition, so I took a year off to deal with that. And so when I came back, I got involved with the adult programs. It was a program called Probation Friends. And I was getting a series of calls from the young people I had worked with who had unfortunately had transitioned over into the adult correction system. I said, "Where's Mr. C at?" We could always call him. And so I was going down, and they were called, and I was going down to the county jail at that point and beginning to work with them as they were becoming young adults. And so that's how I eventually wound up. And I came to work with this organization, Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry, and we began. And then a lot of the young men that were my peers were getting involved in the justice system, and they called me Chuck. They said, well, call Chuck, better call Chuck, And so I was going and started to work with them. And these were fellas that I knew that they had gotten into some trouble, but I grew up with these cats, so I knew their heart. These were good dudes. They were just out doing stuff, that they shouldn't have been doing. And so we started to develop programs to tap their skills and their talents to put these guys to work. One of our most probably flagship programs was our care team program, where we used responsibly trained, carefully selected, well-supervised young men to work in the community with frail, elderly senior citizens, providing them their safe escorts throughout the community. We do their banking for them. We do their shopping for them. So here you got guys convicted of felony going into an elderly senior's house to do banking for her and to go get their medications. But see, I knew these cats, and I knew they wouldn't harm anybody. So it was a breeze. The program shot to national acclaim. The United States Attorney General came to town. Janet Reno said, what's going on in Cleveland? They got folks coming out of prison, working with frail elderly people in the projects, and nothing's happening, unheard of. And that program got replicated in a couple of cities around the country. So it was a good thing, with the basic philosophy being that simply because a person has been involved in the criminal justice system doesn't negate that they have gifts and that they have talents and that they all deserve a second chance. Everything is not for everybody, and we knew that, and so and everybody didn't get a chance to do their job. But I think we demonstrated that there is a place in the community for returning citizens, and if they got a second chance and some opportunities, they could become responsible, contributing members to the community and take their place. And this agency here, Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry, had at one time $1 million budget, and probably 90% of that was paid to formerly incarcerated individuals that were running different programs and were doing all kinds of things throughout the community.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's not one of your significant contributions. So when you look at all of the issues that affect cities and, specifically Cleveland, mm-hmm. we find systemic racism at the root of them all. Mm-hmm. But what is one particular issue that you feel like Cleveland should set as its priority?
Oh, gun violence among young people. Definitely. We're losing far too many children to gun violence. And it's escalating. This year is exceeding what last year was, and children, babies are being shot, young women are being shot, young men are being shot. Folks are losing their lives. It has got to be gun violence. I'm working with a small nonprofit group called Stop the Pain. And we're funded by the St. Luke's Foundation, and we're taking a look at how do we get out in the community among young people and start to deliver a message of hope and right relationship and a new possibility for your life. Because right now they aren't envisioning that. They are involved in this, these back and forth disputes, these turf conflicts that lead to unnecessary death. I used to think that you couldn't die before your time, but you can. And we see it happening every day. We see, 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, being killed. The two children that in, I think, Florida, a 14-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy in a gunfight with police officers using automatic weapons. Now, what is that about? Yeah, so definitely gun violence. And not to say, and probably if you drill down on that, you'll find as much as gun violence is, there's also the state-sponsored violence, the underfunded school systems, the lack of health care, the desert where you can't find fresh produce. As I said, the health care, the political supports that go to maintain these systems, the over-incarceration of people of color. So, you've got those systemic things that contribute to the kinds of pathology that you see that finds its expression in gun violence among young folks. but I would like to be, as I am now, working out on the street with youngsters to say that that your life is valuable to us, and we hurt that when we lose you, this community has lost you.
So if you could leave the world with any piece of advice, what would be your message?
Well, Chardonnay, I think that the best advice has already been given to the world. And if they would but embrace that we would have the kind of world that we all dream of and that we all desire. And that would be to do unto others as you would have others to do unto you. I mean, if we took that seriously, we would have the kind of world that we all dream about. When you think of, as I said, Rodney King's words will echo throughout eternity until they are answered. Why can't we all just get along? We are going to have to answer that question. So that would be my advice. The thing we need the most, the thing we have an inexhaustible supply of, is the thing we use the most sparingly, which is love. I've never heard anybody say, well, I would have loved you some more, but I run out of love. And it's what we need the most. People will respond. I don't care how alienated they are, how abused they have been, how tragic their life has been. They will eventually respond to love. So that would be my advice to the world. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you.
Coffee, would you do me the honors?
Well, Mr. C, we want to thank you so much for your time. As you know, this was to pay homage to people that we feel like have paved the way and opened doors, whether you know it or not. You took a first step into a position that I'm sure opened a door for another young black man. And we want to give people their roses while they are here.
Oh, how about that? Oh, well, thank you so very much. I am delighted. I am thoroughly delighted.
Oh, you're most welcome.
And I accept this too, Chardonnay, in the spirit in which it is given. I get it, and thank you so much. And I will accept it. I will know that I had got my roses while I was here. Thank you so much, man.